Remember where you were when you watched the terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001. Almost 3,000 men, women, and children lost their lives that day, with 6,000 Americans that were left wounded from the attacks. The level of devastation that hasn't been seen, a level of devastation that hasn't been seen on the American soil since the attack at Pearl Harbor. Reflect for a moment and remember how you felt when you watched passenger aircraft fly to the Twin Towers, which would soon later fall to the ground and become ground zero. When you witnessed the chaos and destruction, do you remember if you experienced any emotional distress or physical changes? The Mayo Clinic describes PTSD as an emotional disorder triggered by a traumatic or emotionally stressful event. If you can think about your own personal experience from a traumatic event, traumatic examples such as being robbed at gunpoint or a bad car accident, I can tell you from my own personal experience as a police officer, I've seen and experienced many traumatic and emotionally stressful events. There have been moments in my career where I've seen a lot of ugly in this world on a consistent basis. The toughest thing I've ever had to do was make a death notification to a mother whose child just died from a heroin overdose or a homicide victim. The emotions that followed the aftermath of that scene sticks with me to this day. Or trying to talk to or get suspect information from a victim who's just been raped. Those are traumatic events that change you from that point into the rest of your life, especially when you are directly impacted by these events. These are just a few detailed examples of what's considered emotional stress triggers that lead to post-traumatic stress syndrome. Symptoms of PTSD are common to include frequent anxiety attacks, flashbacks, and nightmares. Other examples include emotional withdrawals or detachment from friends, family, or emotions, period. However, there wasn't a lot known about PTSD until after the 9/11 attacks and the Iraq wars that followed. However, recent studies have showed that a large number of Vietnam veterans have been affected by PTSD. While the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs have made effort into the studies to learn more and combat PTSD. As I stated before, there are so many unknowns about PTSD, especially with the influx of affected military personnel coming home from tours from Iraq and Afghanistan. But let's not forget the first responders who are exposed to emotional and stressful situations on a daily basis. Just recently, an Indian River fire chief with just under 30 years on the job committed suicide due to undiagnosed PTSD-related symptoms. His last social media posting before he died highlighted that PTSD was a real issue that needed to be taken more seriously within the first responder community. Even though his suicide was very tragic, it sparked a new study which revealed that 20% of all firefighters and paramedics have been diagnosed with PTSD or PTSD-like symptoms. Meanwhile, a study conducted by Badge of Life revealed that in the last 6 months of 2015, 51 police officers committed suicide due to PTSD-related symptoms. Even Navy SEAL Iraq War veteran Chris Kyle felt that he suffered from the effects of PTSD. However, there's no medical diagnosis to prove this information. However, he used his outlet to help other soldiers suffering from the effects of PTSD. Tragically, though, he was shot and killed by another soldier who suffered from the effects of PTSD. Some soldiers don't come home the same after experiencing war, and from their eyes, the world looks totally different, which is why a lot of them re-enlist and go back because it's the only world they know, understand, or feel comfortable in. And how do you, as a supportive family member, deal with that? It's hard to understand how this mental illness affects our families. Studies show that first responders tend to abuse alcohol and have higher divorce rates because of the emotional stress from the job. In closing, I hope that I have highlighted some key points and factors that you may not have known about PTSD. I've used some of my own work experience to share with you because these are real issues that the general public doesn't get to see or understand. Yet these issues are continuing to affect everyone around us because we don't quite understand PTSD as a whole to combat this troubling issue.